Well, checking out like some writing, programming, a little bit of like mix of how the arts and like digital arts basically.
Mm-hmm.
Noella, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm Noella. Wait, are we recording?
We are.
Oh,
It's official.
okay.
Are you
For
okay
how
with that?
long? How long has it been recording?
Just a couple seconds.
Okay. So, I played Dungeons and Dragons in middle school with my family, and then in high school I started the Dungeons and Dragons club at my high school. And then I stopped liking Dungeons and Dragons, and then I briefly tried Pathfinder, and I did not like Pathfinder at all, and so now I play Starfinder, which is infinitely better than Dungeons and Dragons in every conceivable way.
Which just means that your engineering background may be more palatable for her because Noella doesn't like fantasy anymore, so she's more into spaceships.
Okay. I love spaceships.
So when Donna came, she enjoyed.
We're
interviewing Donna
like
about
best friends, basically. Donna, if you're watching this,
Donna
don't-
Thompson?
Sorry, Donna
Viola.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You don't plug someone else. That's like talking about an ex on someone on a date.
What?
You don't do that.
Right. I like
no,
Donna
it's
too.
different because me and Donna have like a good relationship.
Yeah.
We email about Love Island. That's not true. I never emailed her about that.
No.
What's your major?
Journalism.
Journalism. Okay.
So it's a fun group. So with that, Nichole, do you want to give us a little bit of your background and what you do? Tell us a little bit about your experiences in whatever way you want to.
So my name is Nichole Neal, and I'm an instructor here in the engineering department at Chandler Gilbert Community College. And I teach the 100 level courses, which are the courses to keep people excited about their pursuit of engineering, regardless of whatever discipline. And so some of the courses that I teach are engineering analysis and engineering analysis tools and techniques. So in that course, we just really expose students to the various disciplines of engineering and Excel as an engineering analysis tool and some other techniques that you can use to solve engineering problems. The main technique we use is a process called the engineering design process, which is very similar to the scientific method, with the exception of the scientific method is very constrained by it's either yes or no, whether the problem can be solved. In engineering, the answer is always yes, no, or maybe. We might need just a little bit more information or technology to be developed in order to solve this problem. And then I also teach an engineering problem solving and design course where we introduce students to 3D modeling, using SolidWorks, and also mathematical modeling using Math. And then we solve a engineering problem using those two tools as a resource to problem solving. And then the class that I really like the most when I have very engaged students, it's an engineering humanities class, and it's called Engineering and Its Impact on Society, because I am very much passionate about you can be the greatest designer and also have really great ideas, but if you are not conscious and really have a level of responsibility to what you're designing and its impact that it will have, not just on the current generation, but across generations and genders and diverse groups of people and blah, 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 then you kind of missed the boat. It's been short-sighted. And I really am passionate about creating engineering design to better our lives across America, across the world, for humanity. And in addition to just being ethically responsible behind those things, you might have the greatest intentions, but did you think through the unintended consequences that humans we will find?
It's like the first step in the design thinking process is empathizing, right? So when we're
Yeah.
talking about engineering in the world or trying to design things for specific people or people groups, we have to think through what their actual needs are, not what our assumptions or biases might play into that.
Yes. Yeah. And then like you may have even actually empathized through that, and you developed something that took all of those things into consideration, what that person needs, but based upon the technology that you developed or whatever that, and because it doesn't necessarily have to be a technology, something tangible or electronic, it could be a service or a process. How can people basically use that against humanity? Like I'm sure that when Mark Zuckerberg, developed social media, Facebook for the first time, and this and the other on the college campus, no one would have ever thought that it would be responsible for us to actually have have a group of people, which I know that I think kind of dismantled it, but just kind of vetted for information that is like misleading or that is just blanket just untrue, just to cause chaos and confusion, because some people just like the game of storytelling and just to see how people are going to react to the other, or they just really have really good imagination. But there's a lot of people that everything that's on the web, they believe it to be true. Yeah.
So with a little bit, with what little you know, or what she's just presented here, what are some kind of first thoughts as far as where, when you're designing a game, like what are thoughts as far as taking on an engineering mindset, or what questions come to mind just for you to do?
I guess when you're talking about engineering humanities, it reminded me a lot of what I've heard about Nobel and how he didn't imagine the use dynamite would be used for. And of course, like the classic mad scientist story of their invention gone wrong because they didn't consider the harm it could cause. Which you could always make a story out of that.
Yeah, I guess there's a mad science portion of this where it's like, when you're, I don't know, you said the mad scientist thing and an invention gone wrong, and I thought Frankenstein, which I don't know how much that applies here, but we certainly could get Frankenstein-like monsters where in a role-playing game, a wizard or a mad scientist creates some sort of pieced together creation that starts going on a rampage for one reason or another.
Yeah.
So, what are checks that people can, like, I guess there's two sides of this, right? Because there's the practical, like in everyday life, we want to make sure we anchor to the truth. And then sometimes one of the benefits of kind of putting it into a weird space of tabletop gaming, in the sense of weird in a positive sense, like a place of play, is we could lean into what it, like having the characters around the table go after someone who intentionally tries to subvert a portion of society. Right? So what are strategies that might show up that either that would show bad engineering or show good engineering, or I don't know what comes to mind.
Yeah, I think bad engineering is just simply designing in a box without having a diverse group of people. You just made me think about something, Greg, where I'm like, how neat would it be, as you talked about, merging the arts, digital arts and technology together, which that's really big now. I mean, we're actually losing the skill set of actually drawing by hand quite a bit, just like in a lot of other professions as we go more, as we become more and more dependent upon technology. But what if when we are designing, what if we, as far as that diverse group of people around the table, why not in our process of testing and seeing what all the uses are, bring it into a situation where we make it a component as part of a game, a tool that somebody can use, and how creative people who are really interested and love playing Dungeons and Dragons. And Noella, I can't remember the one,
Starfinder.
Starfinder. Now, like, what would they do with it? Like, if they actually, giving them 3 to 6 months or however long it would take to see what, how they would reinvent or reimagine the use of said technology, like for people who is going to be used this way or this and the other, and you don't even think, because I don't think that sometimes people intentionally don't think through it. They just think through it in a box that's outside of like what they can imagine. So yeah, I think good and bad design is really based upon, again, I'm a big advocate of like how intentional were you about getting all the voices, like as many voices around the table to vet this.
So maybe Noella, with Starfinder, what's a weird technology that's shown up, and how did it get presented in the game? And then was there ever a time, and how did the table respond to it?
Oh boy.
The tumor gun.
Oh my gosh, there's a flesh gun. Yeah,
About it.
it's okay. So it's it's like made of flesh, and it also shoots flesh.
Like tumors, like with teeth in them? Like
Yeah,
that, or
yeah. It has
Okay.
like teeth and like bone and like fingernails in it. It's
Okay.
really disgusting, actually.
And what are the consequences if I'm shot with this flesh gun and you hit me? What happens?
It hurts a lot.
It hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, am I like getting boils, like protruding tumors all over my body? Or
No, I don't think they've shot anyone with the flesh gun
So
yet.
I guess then the follow-up, so then this is a good, this helps us story build a little bit. So we have this weapon called a flesh gun that shoots basically what could be in a tumor, sadly.
Yeah, you could cut off fingers. One of the players cut off their finger to buy the gun, but the fingers, they could also use the fingers as ammo.
the fingers that they cut off?
Yeah.
they use them
Yeah,
as
yeah.
ammo?
Yeah.
So
Like they're
It's
using their
like a
own
Nerf
fingers.
gun, like a Nerf gun, but
they use the flesh gun to recreate the fingers that they cut off in order to buy the gun.
I mean, I guess so.
I mean,
Like, where does the ammunition
Yes.
normally come from?
Yes.
Like, is it like a tumor creator that shoots tumors?
No, you have to buy it. You have to
So
buy
you have
the
to buy
fingers.
So you're saying it's kind of like a potato gun, but you collect your own flesh?
Oh,
This gets really disturbing. actually.
Yeah.
yes, you have to collect also your flesh is the ammunition. Oh, wow.
They probably have like a partnership with like a morgue or something, where like if you're an organ donor or something, they take your fingers and use it as ammo for the flesh
So this
gun.
follows a social engineering
Exactly.
sustainability practices.
Or like okay, so let's talk about developing a flesh gun that requires flesh in order for it to operate. Yes, you can like do it, you ethically you can have people, okay, we're just going to use organ donors for it or whatever. But then can you see now how it can really go very dark into like really a human trafficking scenario in order, because you can't force it. I mean, that's all volunteer, but say if you don't, I mean, they've already exhausted that what's the word? Resource. Yes.
Didn't you
To
buy it
provide.
from the black market though?
Yeah.
It was a black market weapon.
I was
Yeah.
in this game. It was purchased from a black market, but as you
Yeah.
point out, like this could very easily lead
Yes.
to human trafficking, even like grave robbing.
Yes, grave robbing, all kinds of things where, people are, but I need ammunition for this gun. And my resources are all,
I do. I don't want to say I like the idea of, but I'm intrigued by the idea of what happens. Like, is it an opportunity for an alternate weapon, where, in the sense of like the impact isn't just damage, but it,
Yes.
So sometimes if there's disease or something like that, there's like constitution checks your
Yes.
character has to do, whether they get a
Yes.
disease or that sort of thing. So there's the opportunity here for an alternate, like a texture to using the weapon that's different than a traditional, laser in
Right.
space or something.
In Oliver's dream, it created tumors, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they just found like the closest real life alternative to the tumor creating gun.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, this was like someone having an insane dream and then like, oh, how could I, kind of like how you mentioned the process with engineering of asking like, yes, or the answers either yes, no, or maybe. This was like, I had this insane vision, how could I make this a reality? And then the closest thing was this thing that shoots fingers at people.
And
Yeah.
and depending on who's around the table, if we're trying to empathize with the audience, depending on who's around the table, like some people might immediately be like, ooh, gross, and they're like, who created this? And they want to go find the creator and be like, they need to
Right.
stop because
Right,
this is
you're
going to create.
demented.
Yeah, it's like this is clearly the work of someone evil, not
Yes.
just
That makes me feel good about myself.
No. I'm saying, like, there's
So
variety
let's
of
go find the
responses.
creator and ask the question, what were your intentions and your motives behind it?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes we just jump, to, the worst case scenario instead of like having, conversations with people. I really wish that we would get like, I feel like that society, we are losing our ability to have like civil conversation. And like try to hear whether you agree with them or disagree, but at least explore the why. Like what were you thinking?
I like this idea of like not being murder hobos. That's a D&D term where it's like you get a party who thinks there's anything evil and they just start killing everything.
Yeah.
But it's terrible. It's just wrong. But but it's a thing that is common. But I like the idea of having of like it being a moment of curiosity and like, but why? Like and asking and trying to figure out because or maybe like it seems like there's some possible implications here. Like if it creates tumors, can it reverse tumors? Is there a radiation inside the weapon? or
Everybody
something like
always
that?
asks what is a flesh gun, but nobody ever asks why is a flesh gun.
Or how it works.
Exactly.
I like the idea of it producing its own ammo because then you can
Yes.
think about like, is it a
Yes.
radiation?
Yeah, but like,
weapon?
does it like regenerate then?
Yeah, because or does it
like-
decay like a dead body?
Like a lizard tail or something? Like
rigor
it
mortis.
regrows the.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes, I like yours better.
And then at that point, does it even like feel pain? Is this like a
Yeah,
thinking?
is it alive? This is like
Is there a
this is
nervous
like an
system?
ethical problem, I think.
Like a living gun?
Where do you draw the line between biological warfare?
Yeah.
Yeah, and does it have feelings? Is there central consciousness somewhere?
Do
I
Android dream of
mean,
electric sheep?
Probably. Oh my gosh.
So all right, so that's one technology we can. So I like the end result of that discussion where it's the why or how of it, the why of it really, the curiosity
Yeah.
to the creator. Like, was there an original intended purpose
Yeah.
and design in this, or was it just like a funhouse moment?
So the first step in the engineering design process is to define the problem. Don't ask the questions. Ask the questions and any and all questions. Like I tell my class, and I think most educators instructors. The worst thing you can lead, how you can lead with a question that like really gets under our skin is, this might be a stupid question. No, it's not. Because if you're asking it, it's not stupid. The only stupid question is the one that was never asked. Yeah. Because it's living in your head with no answers.
Willful ignorance. Choosing not to ask.
Yeah.
Well, so then, okay, so we have I pulled out some game materials here that might be points of discussion too. And so we have a couple things here. A couple of these are like, we have 3D printed terrain there. We have some paper crafted, and all of these are worse for wear because of summers in the sun and whatnot. And then a set of dice, and then we've got everything from ship schematics that are in one of the D&D games where they basically fly through what they call the astral sea, which is D&D's version of space. And so some of those are a blend of biological and mechanical.
Where's the other game? Does the other game have
Oh,
a book?
Starfinder.
I didn't bring any Starfinder books
Okay.
today.
Let me
I have
check.
my notes
I
though.
might have something in the bin that's close, but
I have. Oh.
Oh, here you
boy.
go. This was an interesting point. Each of these is like a different setting. So if you don't want to just play like King Arthur's court, basically, you can do like pirates in space, or this is kind of like this is like high fantasy World War I almost, because in this setting they have something similar to a nuclear bomb, and then these robots called Warforged that are initially built for this grand war, and then afterwards they're just left to their own devices and they start to explore like meaning, kind of like what you were talking about of the initial question they were answered was like, oh, how can we build basically an infinite supply of troops ready to fight for an army? And then these troops, when there's no more war to fight, start asking themselves question of like, well, what do I do now? What's my purpose in life?
it's a little bit of that transhumanism kind of orientation. And then I also brought over, I don't have a Starfinder book, but someone left a cyberpunk book.
Oh my gosh.
I haven't looked in it at all, so I would flip past anything that's questionable.
What?
I had
Okay,
opened
hide
it
it
to
from the
like the
camera.
cybernetics or cyber thing. I haven't looked at that game, but someone
What
brought
kind
the
of
book.
books do you have in here? Okay, this page is fine.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know what this is.
No, I know something about this.
I know nothing about this.
So I guess one thing that does come up, I guess, while we're still on Warforged, while Noella tries to find something meaningful in Cyberpunk.
Yeah.
With Warforged,
So Cyberpunk is a different
it's a
game?
different
Different,
tabletop game
yeah.
that's really kind of shooting way into the future. And so that's it's not just space, but it's how would you texture this?
This is like Blade Runner, the game, basically. Like Blade Runner, Aliens.
Where you can jump to different dimensions or something?
Holograms, a
Yeah.
lot of high tech.
Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, NetSpace.
So I'm
You're
trying to get my game. What type of game is Dungeons and Dragons?
So all of these are considered tabletop role-playing games.
Role-playing
So
games,
they're
yes.
they're games that you play around a table and you
Yes.
play as different characters.
Yes.
And the different games are like genre based.
Yes.
So you can play Dungeons and Dragons, which is kind of the traditional like wizards and knights kind of way of looking at the world and fantasy. And then other
You
times
read
with
this?
Starfinder, it has a little bit of fantasy
through
and
some
like
of
the
it.
spaceships.
Creed.
And then Cyberpunk, it really leans into like the cybernetics and technology side.
Okay.
But so it's just different ways of like kind of playing a different type of character.
So is it fair to say that Dungeons and Dragons pretty much stays in this dimension on Earth? Or
I mean,
does
there's
it go outside
Planescape,
of
and then there's
Earth
Spelljammer.
as well? I mean, you can go to different eras on the Earth, but it's not going to launch you into space.
So It's so one of the things about D&D is like it basically is if we explained everything not necessarily on Earth, but tried to explain everything more through magic and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of different worlds. There's different planes. They do have like representations in the system for planes of existence, like heaven, hell, or the elemental planes of like fire and earth and water, and so or chaos. And so all of those things, anything that's ever been represented in a mythology, it has a place in D&D that you could explore. And so there's a lot of flexibility. There's like a core rule set, and then how you
might be able to find something
play
interesting.
your game around the table can depend on what people like. And so like some of that I was thinking a minute ago with while they're still digging into stuff, that some of that empathizing with the people around, like if you're trying to create
There's a
for
guy
people, like
in
some
here
people like
who's a
get a
good
module
talking point.
like a
His name?
pre-built story that to guide
Friday
players
night.
through. And
See if
one
I
of the
can
things
find
that new people running the game often realize is those modules like constantly get broken because the players, something that the designers of the game who aren't at the table can't anticipate, the players decide to explore. It's like they throw in one little token, like non-player character that suddenly becomes somebody's best friend, and now the person running the game has nothing in the book to go off of, and so you end up making it up on the fly anyway. So from a game design standpoint, like there are the pre-built modules that tend to be more that are often considered more like a guided campaign or a guided story, and when it's really anchored to, it can be considered railroading because your players don't have the flexibility. And then we also do like the engineering style sandbox game where it's like when I'm running games like that, it's like I'm seeding the table with little snippets of possibility and seeing what people gravitate towards. So I might toss in a little romance and see if more than one player digs it, or I might toss in a little bit of something kind of cyber oriented or robot oriented to see if they gravitate toward that, or just toss in some children being happy and frolicky and see if that, like, they're like, ooh yay, and they want to play like a whimsical game.
So how long have you been playing Dungeons and Dragons?
I started
years.
What'd you say?
I said 40 years.
Wow, no, I am not 40 years old yet. That's
Really?
April. No, it's
Oh. For some
April.
reason, I assumed you were
April, I
like the
turned
same
40
age as my
April.
parents.
April
It's
5th.
on the internet.
I'm April 11th.
Nice. Yeah, so that's
So rabbit.
I know someone whose birthday is April 11th. Wait.
Cannot seem to find it.
So I've been playing since about 2016, or I played like one time when I was 13 or two times when I was 13, and then never played again because I didn't have the friends to play, and it was not a common thing. I just read a lot of epic fantasy. Yeah, I know. I didn't say I didn't have friends. I just didn't have friends with me. Anyways.
If you have friends that play D&D.
We would make up our own like economy game. It's like my best friend now, he like is an entrepreneur, and I remember us building like purchasing systems. It was funny. But anyways, so I specifically D&D I got into in like 2016, 2017. I was like halfway through the PhD program and was like, I need something other than academic stuff to engage with, but that's fun. And so I started kind of going back to, I had a lot of friends at ASU who played D&D. And so I started looking up streams to kind of get a rule set, and then I started playing with my family first. And so I've been running games. So I've run games when my youngest daughter was 3.5. She came into a game as like a baby spider,
Oh, wow.
a baby giant spider. So he was the size of a dog and like could shoot
This
web.
would be a
So,
good talking point.
so yeah, that's one of the fun things for me. What'd you guys find though?
Oh, I do have some knowledge of cyberpunk, and this is like basically, as you mentioned, supposed to be Earth in the future. People have developed technologies. It's like what you were talking about of people building all this tech and then not thinking at all about how it would be abused. So this is a future where like everything from the police to like medicine is a commodity. Like there's no more goodwill for anyone. If you want to go to a hospital, you have to pay a subscription, and everyone's like a cyborg. You're always modifying your body, but then that leads to everyone being like everything being hackable. So there's loads of just hacker groups and whatnot manipulating people to get what they want.
So at least from a story building and character building standpoint, it gives you a lot of room for. It might take something that where it's like maybe in D&D you have like the ability to charm people with your magic. In that game, it might be someone has hacked your system, or you've kind of hacked their system to get them to like you, so that they'll give you a discount on something you need for your mission, or
And
not
then,
which really gets into whole other ethical issues of like, which is always an interesting thing.
then there's a big thing in this system about cyberpsychosis, where people have been workers have fewer rights. So whether you will become a cyborg no matter what, and some people get so much of their flesh removed and replaced with machine that they basically forget what it's like to be a person. And well, they not necessarily forget what it's like to be a person, but they just become
There's
so
an identity
traumatized. Yeah.
Yeah.
The cyborg of Theseus.
Yeah, they become traumatized because they're like, oh my goodness, I'm nothing more than like property for whatever corporation owns my parts. And then they just go crazy with the fact that they're made up of all this stuff that doesn't belong to them. Kind of like RoboCop.
As weird as that sounds, what is your engineering brain and some of the things like as far as teaching the engineering and humanities? What does that parallel with that might be a little more anchored to our everyday life?
Oh. I mean, I dare I say, artificial intelligence. Dare I say it? I mean, it's the buzzword of today. But you know, what I have been like trying to get more information about is that we are like quickly exiting towards the end of the fourth industrial revolution, where humans and computers meet. The fifth industrial revolution is, from my understanding, is like we are rapidly approaching, and really I believe we're in there where humans and machines meet. And how do we exist together, like without it being I guess dehumanizing, and losing like our purpose and our ability to think. Like, I'm sure most people like smartphones. I don't know. They're no longer smart. They just make us dumber. They're smart, but like they don't really make us like too much smarter anymore. I was born in the 1900s, and I tell my students I was born in because I was born in the 1900s, and I mean. Not when cell phones became popular and I became dependent on a cell phone, I lost the will and the desire to know people's numbers by heart. Prior to this device, I probably knew at least 20 or 30 phone numbers by heart. You know, I struggle now to even just remember my children's cell phone number because I don't. I just touched on it. I don't.
So that place. So then that's interesting in one sense because there's when we're doing world building for games, especially for those of us who run games, we might like one of the things that can create a fun role play is discrepancy of resources.
Yeah.
And so on the one side, one thing I hear like commodification of body parts, that kind of thing, but also like when we're talking about like a new technology being brought into a culture that whether, and sometimes it's social class, and then sometimes how does that change that, right?
Do you all get involved with that at D&D, social class and
Oh,
gender and all of that?
definitely.
Oh wow.
Share some things.
Well, part of like this has definitely been brought up as D&D has been more mainstream, so more people pay attention to it. But like the original game drew a lot from traditional fantasy and fairy tales.
Like Lord of the Rings and that sort of thing.
So it definitely came with a lot of like the social systems working, like, you know, especially early in the earlier versions of the game, you're basically medieval warriors going into these other societies and just killing people because these creatures, well, these like humanoid beings who are referred to as just monsters, like goblins and whatnot, who, despite the fact that they're basic, you know, they function just like a human can. They speak the same language. They have the same level of intelligence, but they're, you know, they're outsiders. And that conflict there's been attempts to like focus, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like move away from that kind of narrative.
Yeah.
And
As some of the books have progressed from like 2015 to the more recent versions, they've tried to add layers of like playable races. They've even tried to shift away from the idea of a race to what they're calling it, like, to species now.
Species, yeah.
Which does complicate some of the rules because there is like a goblin or an elf or a human, they can interbreed.
Yeah.
So the species thing, I'm not sure I'm a big fan of, but that idea of like complicating a race having a default like evil or good setting, you know, so like elves are always like good. Or almost always, unless they're weird.
Yeah.
You know, goblins default to evil. You know, and that idea of like, there's a lot of. So they've really tried to, in the rules, approach that sense of othering happening. And so, like, one of the things that we've talked about as like a DM strategy is like, if you've got say you roll a random encounter in one of the tables, it's like a help where you roll a d100, it gives you a monster to give the party, and so it may say like 2 trolls or 1d4 trolls, where you roll d4 and see how many trolls show up, or 2d6 goblins show up, and so you can decide whether they're, you know, how you want to play that. If it's so for instance with the trolls, like, I've encouraged them, like, the trolls don't have to be enemies. It's not like the party comes on trolls who are just devouring, you know, townspeople. It could be they're having a wedding, and if the players are wanting, they can actually take part in the wedding and be like officiating the service, like, instead of what, you know, 20 and 30 years ago would have happened is like pull the troll.
So to play a game, do you have to like basically prepare the gamers for, like, we're going to do a game on Astral Adventures Guide.
Yeah.
So everybody has to read through this to see what tell me what this looks like.
What's your process, Noella?
Me, I don't.
Aside from the 78 slideshow version.
It's 81 slides actually.
I know, I'm sorry.
I don't make my players read anything. I just tell them stuff like as they find it, and then I don't know, if it's something that their character would already know based on like their background and like their, I call them roles, but they're classes, I guess in D&D they're classes.
Yeah.
Then it's like you already know this, and if it's something that they probably wouldn't know like automatically, then they have to roll for it, but I don't make them read anything.
Okay. So classes. If I'm playing if I'm going to show up for a game, how far in advance do I know like what class I'm going to be placed in, or do I just typically go with the type of class that I normally play or whatever? How do you how do you decide who's at the table for a game? Is it by invitation and it's based upon like their skill or their role or class?
At D&D Club, I have like pre-made characters, so if someone comes in and they want to play, I just give them a stack of paper. It's not a stack of papers, a few papers
Like 2
that they
pages.
can choose
like
from.
81 pages.
Yeah, and then they just look like they just look at like the most important information at the top of the page and then pick the one one that they vibe with the most.
I
I
should've-
always play a cleric.
Oh, what's a cleric?
It's,
You always
I do,
do.
yeah, I always play cleric.
If she's not running a game.
Basically, they do magic.
Oh.
Yeah, and
But with
I like
religious fervor
it's
and
like
power.
mostly healing magic.
So there really is a broad spectrum of engagement in the game. Everything from like walk in and we will get you going from nothing, and all you need to know is like the DM will set a scene. Your character, you can respond based on how you think your character would. And if you haven't looked at your character, just take 30 seconds, and kind of get a quick like read the character sheet or the main beliefs of the character and then go from there. So it can be as easy as like 30 seconds and we're going and we're making it up as we go. I've even had people roll their character stats as they try to do things. Like they have amnesia. They don't know anything about who they've been, so then they're constantly discovering. And so that's like the walk in and play kind of model, right? And then and especially if you're introducing people to new systems like Starfinder or some of the other games, we have like a DC-20. It's a whole other game, Cyberpunk, or an Avatar-based game, which is like the Last Airbender, if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I saw it.
So, and then there are other ones where we have like we have a scheduled campaign for a specific setting, and we do what's called a day zero session. Do you want to explain what a day zero session is?
Oh yeah. So for if you have people that are committed, usually like friends or whatnot, then you'll sit them all down and you'll basically just go over what all they need to read through or know beforehand. So whoever's running the game will explain like, all right, this is the world, this is the vibe I'm going for, whether it's like dark fantasy or more whimsical.
Okay, so they kind of set the tone, whoever's
Yeah.
running the game.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, depending on the campaign, like if you're like this is a module, it's a specific set of adventures for a specific like level 1 to level whatever. And so one part of like a more planned campaign is at the back of this, instead of kind of just generate a random like ideal for the character or someone they're connected to, in the back it has a specific section that says you can swap for one of these kind of beliefs or bonds or backgrounds. So then it's like specific to characters that would be in this particular adventure or groups that would show up in this particular adventure. So then that gives them, instead of a generic possibility of role play, it gives them a more situated, specific context to anchor to. Yeah.
Have you all seen a increase, or what's the word I'm looking for? Have you seen any effects that artificial intelligence has had on the D&D, like playing the game? Because I'm sure you can do it online. You can play this online with other
Yeah.
people.
So like
Have
how
you-
have we seen like technology and AI come into play in the game?
Yes. How?
Greg
Yes.
has AI generated maps.
I
Okay.
do have those.
I don't like
the stable
them.
diffusion,
They have
but they're better
like
than nothing. in
random
my-
shapes. They have just like, oh my gosh.
So,
I like to use the
Sometimes the
whiteboard
maps
and
have
then-
like they have like the stable diffusion thing. Not these. Oh, they're over here. I'll get them. Keep going. Keep going. Noah.
What about characters? Like, have you noticed anyone like, I guess, if you're playing with them virtually, where their gameplay is like AI generated? Maybe they have another computer next to them and they're moving. They're actually asking AI like what should be my move or this and the other. Have you seen any of that?
I mean, I do that as a DM. Do you guys use that as use GPT for DMing?
Only for, like,
Yeah,
names.
I'd say
What's direct messaging
Oh,
for DMing?
sorry, Dungeon Master. So game
Oh.
mastering, if you're running, I didn't give you a whole lot of context.
the way
So like dungeon mastering or game mastering, or the DM or GM is the person who's kind of facilitating the whole table. Or the,
Okay.
yeah.
My sociology through film teacher calls herself a game weaver. Isn't that
Oh,
fun?
that's cool. Is it Kendra? What's her name? What's her last name?
Belle.
Belle. Yeah.
I'm gonna email her.
Yeah. We should. Yeah.
Oh.
So there are people who generate like maps from AI like that. I have used in a few campaigns GPT to generate character art or things that I didn't have time to really do. I've also used it to generate like people to attack. I'm like, generate me a level 15 wizard that has X, Y, and Z abilities, and that just kind of does all the math for me to the best. And I might tweak it along the way, but
you haven't seen anyone actually using that as a shortcut to like develop their character, to like take away the imagination, other than the DM, but like the actual players in responding, just so that they can win.
When GPT first kind of was published, people started exploring it. They tried to get GPT to DM a game, and so it was like, okay, so if there's a prompt you can give it, and I've explored this, you can say like, be my DM. We have 3 characters. Here are the characters, and here we'd like it to be this setting. Start for us, and then tell us what you'd like us to do. And so then it's basically like a play-by-post style, which is a traditional like bulletin board style, where you say something, then you wait for the DM to get back or the other player to get back. Have you guys experienced this at all?
Yeah. There is a like kind of like what you were mentioning. Some since in a lot of tabletops, the game master is essentially the human. It's like the computer for a video game. So they're like, whatever the players think of, you have to respond. And so some people have tried to use it for solo play when they want to play. Yeah. But
otherwise you're rolling a lot of dice and stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of build their skill set, or if they just don't have anybody to play with and they want to play.
Yeah.
Little Greg would have loved that.
Yes, he would. Instead, he just read Lord of the Rings 7 times.
You're insane. I got
Before
2/3
13.
of the way through the first one and gave up.
Oh my
Well, now you know
goodness.
why the pacing of my games is so much slower than yours.
Want to join us for
Yeah, and I
5
know we're getting
minutes?
close on time because you said you have till 5.
Yeah.
I
we're
did want to
talking
ask
about
you a little bit
engineering.
about,
Here's
because,
a
well, so some of this is like, I didn't want to kind of lean into the engineering and
You're gonna be
materials
on
side of
YouTube. How
things.
does it
Yeah.
feel?
But so we have like we'll have maps like these stable diffusion maps. We'll have wet or dry erase mats like you see over there. Sometimes we'll prototype things with cardboard the way some of your engineering students would. So when it comes to maybe prototyping or coming up with, what's the engineering term, like the least, or it's like the basic functional model or something. I can't remember the term now. I had it in my head. Least viable product? Like that?
I don't know. I mean,
AI
She's so judgmental.
I don't like
Maps.
them. They have
Anyways.
like weird shapes.
So, back to the
do have
conversation.
It's a square.
So I guess when it comes to you having your engineering students design, if we're trying to see if craft something quickly, like quick prototyping, is there anything like what are some suggestions you can make if we're trying to throw something together for a game and we want it to be a little bit more experiential than just like what's called theater of the mind? So something a little more tangible.
I guess I would have to. That's why I was asking more about the gameplay. So, are these like built like on the spot?
So not necessarily. Like for instance, like this is. I knew I was going to give my group an airship. So this has seen better days, but it used to have a blimp, and it is built to scale because the game scale is 5 feet per inch.
Okay.
And then some of the 3D printed things. So you might have someone like, if we're in turn-taking mode in what's called initiative, they might move their minis a certain number of inches and then discover something or step on a plate, a trap or something like that. Or
So is it the DM that brings all of the?
usually
They craft all of these things.
Yeah.
It's not the players themselves.
Unless it's like I have a game I run on Mondays where they have an upgraded airship now, and one of the players is like, "Do you want me to make a version of that for you?" But it's like after I've gone through and described it all, I could have been cool and brought my version of it, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Is that the one you use the bottom of a cardboard box for?
No, that was the one that was different.
Okay.
I use all kinds of lame recyclables in my gameplay to add to the experience.
So I don't know if this is where you are headed or this is what you're looking for. In engineering, the biggest thing is that I try not to I really emphasize to students to stop weaponizing failure. Failure in engineering, you fail a lot in order to get to the final result. So just start somewhere. So if you are like a DM and you're like, oh, it'd be nice, but I'm not really good in prototype or this and the other. At least just start somewhere. Yeah. So and don't be afraid of judgment and this and the other. Be curious about how other people can help because one of the things I've noticed about just in the conversation when I first started, I was like, this is a very self-centered game. It's giving like me fight me, I don't care about anybody else. But the more that I hear about like the actual format and bringing a game together, it's very community based.
It is, yeah,
and
yeah.
it does require and opens you up to like people working together to imagine what it can be and then to reimagine like what somebody else the DM has imagined and like we can do based upon like whatever roles or that people play or what do you call it, the class and where the game goes that what you imagine, it takes on a totally different life of its own where it has to be reimagined.
Yeah.
So just don't be afraid. And I don't know if most people, go into or how many people shy away from the role of being the DM. Because it sounds like it's a lot of responsibility and requires a lot of creativity. But I would say, just start somewhere. Start with a small game, and a small narrative, and just lean on your community to take that design that you started with, because it should never be the same. So when people talk about practicing medicine, we practice engineering. Everything that we do, we practice as humans. If I have an iPhone 12. If you have an iPhone 13, you just bought the next version of the practice of the iPhone. Because we're constantly learning and developing. So I would just say, go out and just start with something. And in this self-serving kind of game, allow the community to lean on the community to let it take on a life of its own. If I'm understanding the game.
Well, and I think
correctly.
I really appreciate that. You described it as like something about, what did you describe it as far as failure goes? Like
fail often.
Yeah.
To get to success, don't be afraid of. One of my favorite quotes, and it's something that I use in my class. A quote by Nelson Mandela, and he says, I don't lose, I either win or I learn. Yep. So I tell my students, we don't fail in this class. We're either going to win or we're going to learn. And either one, we're coming out ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think because I think part of the language you said, you started out seeing it as like a self-serving game, but it really is like it is probably one of the least like me-oriented games, because the collaborative nature of it is we're telling a story together, which requires listening, empathy, advocacy for others, and our own like characters, not even ourselves. So like sometimes having a character who's boisterous played by someone who's quiet, like it gives them motivation to practice speaking up, which it goes beyond themselves, and so it becomes something that actually people have used to tie from research from role playing and therapy and that sort of thing. It's been used to develop empathy and like in inmates and that sort of thing, and have them think through the consequences of actions and be a little more, develop those sorts of practices. It's
And I can see in engineering how it can be used, because one of the things a lot of my students, like, I'm not creative, but I have typically in a class of 24 students, maybe 20% of them feel like, oh, you know, I'm a designer, I'm creative, because you don't, I think a false perception of engineers is that they all are creative, that they're just, but no, it takes all kinds of skill sets in order to navigate the engineering design process. So those students who feel like, you know, I don't feel like I'm that creative, I think a game like Dungeons and Dragons could really help them, like, really bring out that creative side in them, because we lose the ability to just be free and to imagine and to not and stop judging yourself. Just go for it. Yeah.
See, now I want, like, now we need a session 2, because I know you need to go. And I want to do a session 2 where we talk about, like, what role playing would look like in the engineering class, with like user avatars where the engineering students are like playing as specific users of whatever it is.
Yes.
I think
So
there's
I'm a hands-on learner, and so I wish I had more time, because I was going to say I need to play a game. I need to play around in order for me to really understand, like, what this would look like.
Is that a good smile?
I have the greatest idea.
Okay, we will talk more about.
Okay.
We'll talk more then. So,
Okay.
Nichole, thanks for coming and talking with us. I appreciate you sharing some insights on engineering and asking some really meaningful questions about the game itself too.
Noella and
Killian.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Nice to meet you.
I've seen you somewhere. What's your name?
I'm Val.
Wow. You look familiar. Maybe I just saw you somewhere.
Maybe. Sure.
Thank you. I'll see you in the hallway
for the
tomorrow.
opportunity.
Thanks. And thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you for coming by.
If you want to jump over, like, we can talk a little more, because she's
Oh,
got to go,
whoops.
but we don't have to be done for a few minutes.
Oh, my
Okay.
bad.
If we want to, unless you got to run, what are your thoughts?
We should do a teacher Dungeons and Dragons where we
I
get a
know.
bunch of
Oh my
teachers
God.
and they play Dungeons
Right?
and the students DM for the teachers.
Absolutely. I want it so bad. I know of at least 2 or 3 teachers who might be able to commit for sure. But
I'll
then
talk
it's
to my
scheduled.
sociology
Yeah,
teacher.
yeah, I
I'll
think
talk to
that'd be really
Donna
cool.
as well.
Would a student be students a DM?
Yeah.
For
Oh
the
my
teachers?
goodness.
That
Yeah,
would be
either
so
a
cool.
student, it depends on availability. So yeah,
I guess.
yeah.
We also need to. This is unrelated, but we also need to run a game with the One Voice Club.
Yes.
That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
And I thought so. What were some of your, like, thoughts that we couldn't get into because insert reason here? But we covered things from, some of everything from technology and identity and engineering practice. What were some of the things that you are in your mind?
When she started talking about using this as a sandbox to explore without,
No, plain safe.
causing real harm, instantly my mind jumped at like stuff like the immovable rod and how people have worked out the physics. Like people have brought, like you can't. I wanted to answer when she was asking like, oh, using AI to get the best result of like, well, they usually can't because it's discussion and you can't just like take the time like, oh, let me look up real quick.
Yeah.
But people have been like, all right, I worked out the physics on what would happen if you had this magic immovable rod that just stuck in place, and they factored in like the certain what's the word? Like the movement of the earth of like, all right, so this
like
thing is just gonna
does it stay? Is it an absolute or a relative immovable rod?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the question of like, if you have invisibility powers, does your clothes become invisible, or
Right.
like everything you're holding? But then like, if it's everything you're touching, then can you make a wall invisible by touching the wall?
This is valid.
Or
And
is
these
it
are
just
fun.
you and then
yeah.
your clothes floats around?
And then you get into the absurdities of like, well, shouldn't vampires burn up at night because moonlight is just reflected sunlight?
Yeah.
Whatnot.
I think I've heard it's like, oh, it's diffused.
Yeah.
The
Oh, yeah.
sunlight's diffused, so it
So
doesn't count.
it's not as uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and hi, I don't think I've met you before. I don't think so.
I came here once, and then I set up a god-awful tic-tac-toe game, and then I left.
Oh yeah, it was the tic-tac-toe.
Oh,
That's me.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, so then with a little bit of what we were getting into on the engineering side, what else? What did it make you think of aside from immovable rods? What else? What else came up?
You do engineering, right? No.
No.
Or anything that got triggered by the conversation?
I don't know. I just think it's really cool when D&D is expanded outside of just the use of, oh, this is a game where people role play and then take on a new identity, and then that's kind of just the cutoff, like, oh, we're telling a story together. But you can also expand that to a lot of other stuff, like engineering.
Yeah.
That could be used to boost skills, especially socially, I would say, and like on your feet decision making.
Yeah.
Taking in like what stats do you have, what options do you have, out of the box thinking. It could be applied with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and I want us to be able to talk with her more about this, but since I'm teaching kind of the design thinking thing for my rhetoric of games right now, English 102, like that we were doing audience analysis, which is part of empathizing, and one thing that technical writers and designers do is they will take data and then they'll try and it's like a reverse stereotype, because stereotypes are just based on bias. But if you take data and you go, okay, what are the clusters of identities that might actually be a real person? It still sounds terrible, but the user profile. And so but if engineers got around the table and each of them had to pretend to be a specific user, a representative user, and then they were trying to engage with whatever it was, the design of a hospital or or some new technology, it's like then it does help them kind of think through, well, what are the limitations of this person versus me? And so I feel like there's a lot more there. So aside from the flesh gun, anything technology-wise or anything else in Cyberpunk that you guys were thinking about we didn't get to?
I didn't look through it too much. And it's like hard for me to think of the technology things that are weird for my players because I'm so used to them. Like I wasn't even thinking about the flesh gun.
It's just like, it's a thing. Well, what is any technology, right, that you use in your game?
In your game, there's there's like semi-aquatic species that have like technology so that they can still have the water that they need while they're in like drier places, and it like covers their gills.
So
and
a
then,
water
like, their
helmet
mouth
instead
and
of an
stuff.
air helmet kind of
Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. So that'd be cool to explore. Yeah.
I've never refined this to put it in a game or a story, but this is also related to water. I've thought in Nichole, right? Dr. Nichole, she was talking about like there's no stupid question except that which is unasked. And I was thinking like, well, if you had an alien, because you played Starfinder and you got all these aliens that grow up in so many different environments. Like you even have living suns. Like how does a living how does something that's like I'm assuming like
I removed that in the most recent iteration.
a 4-foot radius ball of plasma. How in the world does that thing compete? Like, what does an industrial revolution look like for that? Or in my case, I was thinking, if you had like this whole species that's like us, and they're advancing even to space age, but they all live underwater. What does warfare look like for creatures that live in an environment where a bullet is not effective because of how much it's just going to drag? And I've looked up, like, there's gyro jets,
percussion grenades,
and like
the mines underwater and stuff. Like
Now-
with all the submarine like use in wars, there is ways to do it underwater.
And I'm sorry, you go.
It's okay. I was just saying, I feel like how on land ranged weaponry is like optimal to use for large scale battles because it gives you that distance and power. I feel like it would be the opposite underwater. It'd be close combat that would give you like high advantages. So their close combat weaponry would be really good. But also sonar. I don't know if y'all know about sonar, but underwater that stuff can be deadly.
Yeah. Well, and like the idea of ranged versus, it's like with sonar, it's likely to control it becomes a problem, right? Because you're going to hurt enemies and friends alike, right? But also, like, does it force people out of conflict faster because they have to get into melee and it's bloody and bad
Yeah.
before they can really get to like the full skirmish. So by the time 4 or 5 people have just brutally died, they've decided this conflict isn't worth it. You know, like it slows their motion, but it also slows their like allows their brain time to process and not just be adrenaline junkies. Or even water temperature, right? Like they talk about the cooling effect for anger and frustration. So does that play a role in how often conflict underwater is? But I don't know if that's well, it's sort of engineering related.
Yeah.
Like it changes warfare, it also changes the social and political, right?
I
Yeah.
just keep inviting people to the discussion.
That's fine.
Without consulting you, we're just gaining.
I invited anyone who wanted on Discord. I just asked for like, let me know you're coming. That's all.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, like, of course, there's the base engineering of like how this technology works, but that is going to affect how their society develops as well. Like you said, we use ranged weapons because that's effective. Like even our ancestor species, they evolved like wrists, unlike chimpanzees, bonobos. Our wrists were adapted to actually like bend and throw stuff because that made us more effective at killing stuff and then eating. But like underwater, speed, maneuverability, being slippery, being able to slip in and out is probably going to be more effective because a gun there's just too much working against it, and then that is going to change their society. Like in Dune, you know, it's not millions, like hundreds of thousands of years in the future, but they're still mostly using swords because their lasers have been rendered obsolete by their shields because of the, you know, when they make contact, they make a thermonuclear explosion. So it's like, oh, we can't actually use guns anymore because they're just not as effective if we blow up our own guys.
Well, and I think that's a fun part of engineering because I think she shared like engineering is at first about defining the problem. Like it's really about trying to find solutions that are valuable to people, right? That's really what engineering ends up being about. And so the idea that we have to start by knowing what the real problem is, you know, and so taking time to do the research to define what the real problems are potentially, and from design thinking processes, there's this idea of wicked problems that can't be solved with a single solution, and sometimes that's large social ills or something like that, but other times it's just something that is too complex for a single solution to be the answer. So then you create systems of solutions, and so it's curious to think about how D&D or other tabletop gaming might help people explore the variety of possibilities, kind of like when you have the same module with different players and you get very different paths.
Yeah. Yeah, like it even allows us to explore stuff that may not even be possible in our world. Like, for example, if I remember correctly, and by no means an engineering anything, adept, novice, but as far as I remember from computer science, brain uploading is still very much impossible just because of, like, it's the way human mind, like, brains are like an organic computer, but they're a computer in such a the way the system is so insanely different from how a mechanical computer works that there's no, like, way to translate. But in D&D, you have phylacteries, like ghosts and all that. Magic. And I'm sure in Starfinder, because I know Starfinder has magic, but I know you don't use magic as much, and I don't know what your stance with it is. But, like, it's still, like, you still have faster than light travel. Like, stuff that may not even be possible in our world.
Thoughts on what Killian's saying?
At the very beginning, you said something about like uploading brains.
Uploading, yes.
It reminded me of a TV show I'm watching right now called Pantheon, where they take the brains of dead people and upload them into like an artificial intelligence program. And it's like an ethical concern because when they die, they're like owned by the company that uploaded them to the artificial intelligence. And so this girl, like the plot of the show is that this girl is like trying to regain ownership of her father's brain. Yeah, anyways.
Interesting.
Sorry to laugh. I just saw your reaction to, like, concerned reaction to, like, brain up. I'm sorry.
It's
a really
okay.
good
You're
show.
not
I
in the
think it's
angle
the
of
new
any of the
Scavenger's
cameras, so
Reign.
you're fine. You're good. Oliver, however, is in the background. I feel. So thoughts on things
Introducing
Killian said
Oliver.
as far as or
I
Noella?
I think
I'm sorry. I don't want to like just put you on the
I
spot
grew up
here.
watching Star Trek, so I have that fantastical sci-fi background. So I find it all fascinating. And even if we never achieve stuff like warp speed or light speed travel, it's still such a fun concept to explore. Because if you think about it, there's a lot that we thought impossible in the past that is now possible in the
Yeah.
future. So I guess there's a kind of hopeful thing of like people have this in their imaginations, so it might happen.
Yeah.
It's like we don't have flying cars, but we have airplanes.
Well, and I like that when we're like in D&D, one of the cool things about magic is it's still like we might have wizards try and develop spells for things and use magic to accomplish a different task or a task differently than we would in like everyday life, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have to necessarily have the how yet, right? So it's like they're just like, well, I discovered, like, you know, part of somebody's backstory could be they discovered they could do magic because they were tired of lifting the hay bales, they were too tired, and they somehow stumbled upon a levitation spell, right? And they don't even know how it happened, but then they figured it out. You know what I mean? Like many scientific discoveries work, you know. You know, it's like, oh, sugar works that way. I didn't mean to boil it with that combination of things to or whatever.
Injecting
Or-
myself with this disease from a cow makes
Yeah.
me immune to this other disease. Curious.
Yeah. But yeah, so I like that there's an exploratory possibility of problem solving that can happen when you don't have to have every step played out. Like I think some people like Nichole was sharing, like some people get into like, well, that fail mode. Like if I can't figure out every step and I don't know every step, well, it's going to fail, and if it fails, then I shouldn't have started, or I should have figured it out ahead of time. And so that perfectionism, it can help you release from the perfectionism. So because you're only focused on like, what do I want it to do? I want it to go from there to there. Done. Magic. Okay, well, and then you can backtrack and go, well, how, and then the DM's like trying to figure out like how that actually works.
Yeah.
Or we're rolling to see like we're coming up with a story of how on the fly. So
Or you can even. Yeah, I remember. I didn't lose that train of thought.
okay.
Or you could even talk about how even if your original result wouldn't work, you can stumble into something different that's even better in a way. Like I can't name any specifics at the moment because I can't think of any, but I know there's been inventions where it's like, I wanted to do this. Oh, gunpowder. If I remember correctly, the story is like, oh, we wanted to make the elixir of life, but instead we have this explosive powder. Huh.
Close enough, right?
We
Whoops.
wanted to make an elixir of life, but we made the powder of death.
I was thinking the same thing.
Now I can blow holes in mountains and make it much easier to move massive amounts of resources.
Tried to do it in the desert, and so because of that, it was too arid and not humid enough. So we ended up with powder of death instead of elixir of life. Yeah. Bummer.
Damn.
What was something else? So there was we even talked about like ethical identities and transhumanism and stuff. What do you got,
We're
Noelle?
making eye contact.
Is that awkward
Yeah.
for you two to make eye contact?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's funny.
Oh yeah.
Well, don't stare at her, Noella.
I'm not. I'm looking back and forth.
Good. Okay.
This baby has so much transhumanism in it.
Yeah.
Because as I was talking about with the so it's called cyber psychosis, where people, it's a lot like what you see in RoboCop, where everyone's getting parts, new like flesh swapped out for mechanical bits, whether because they personally want to, or in some scenarios it's because, oh, your company, you know, it's like companies acting like it's a good thing because you're more efficient, and then boom, now like you're 20% company property because you have like a backhoe attached to your back. And some people get so modified that they become like there's very little flesh remaining, so they start to just, they become very mentally troubled because they're like, oh, none of like what makes me me belongs to me anymore.
So there's a existential philosophy that kind of shows up of like, am I the sum of my parts? Am I if I'm not all flesh, am I still human? And what is a person to person, no matter how small or cybernetic? What makes it so? There's a lot of fun kind of identity play you can do with the variety of games, different tabletop games we can have. It also makes me think like body parts on credit, right? So like, you mentioned the backhoe, and I'm just wondering like someone who, if they have a particular profession where a shovel arm or a shovel leg would be more effective, and so that becomes their profession. So instead of investing in, say, like an ice cream truck, right? Someone invests in like their arm becoming an ice cream maker, right? And so they just walk everywhere serving ice cream, but it's on loan. So technically it's theirs, but it's not, because the bank owns until they've paid it off.
Yeah.
So can you repo someone's ice cream maker arm?
Crazy.
And what does that do? So it's just stuff to think. Stuff that putting things in weird context.
We have aliens that have like arms that are sides, and they work predominantly on farms.
Gotcha. And does that supposedly make it easier than just like a traditional less?
What are your thoughts?
I was gonna say, it sounds like the ship of Theseus to me. How many planks can you
I
remove?
said that earlier.
Yeah, how many planks can you remove before it's actually the ship of Theseus? But obviously there's a difference, because that's a ship and this is a whole human person.
Yeah.
But I feel like it would be a very dangerous society if you could put your body parts on loan. Because I know today it's like a big, don't sell your body parts. It's illegal to sell human body parts. But if they're not technically human, they're technically computers, I feel like corporations would grab onto that so fast. They would take that so fast and be like, oh, you're working for us? Well, you need to have laser eyes. You need to have laser eyes if you want to work here. And laser eyes are super expensive. So we can give you laser eyes, but you're going to be paid less until you pay off your laser eyes.
Like an indentured servant policy with like Catch-22 style.
That's what I feel like it is.
There's also the way battery cores and spare parts and things, like when you go to the mechanic and they change your oil.
Yeah.
The oil doesn't just go away. They send it, they reprocess it, they clean it up, they resell it, right? Say like rubber from tires, some transmissions and things, like those things get repurposed. So in my mind, I'm wondering if like someone's like, yeah, sure, we can totally, and it's like it's part of that, like they charge you a disposal fee and then they go and sell your arm that you got swapped out for an ice cream maker. They go sell that arm to someone else who wants an arm, and so suddenly it's like really thinking like there's the economy side of this exploration and the identity side of this exploration that just gets really weird and interesting.
Yes.
And only can be explored these days in tabletop role-playing games or other forms of fictional media. So,
And hopefully not in real life.
yes.
Oh yeah.
Well, with that seems like a
All
good
in
play.
good
Any other final thoughts before we stop this live stream here?
There's one other person in the live chat with me.
Okay.
What are they
Crazy.
saying?
Have they commented
They
anything?
said hi, and then I said hi like a long time later, and I don't know if they care anymore.
They might be gone now.
It might be a different person
Oh.
too.
Maybe.
But if you're there, shout out Jordan6767.
Thanks, Jordan 67.
Thank you,
Like
Jordan.
Mario's handle. I can't remember. Is that his Discord? Anyways, so it might be. Well, so in thinking about next time, like we heard a little bit of what Nichole said, or we walked in and found out that we were talking about engineering and tabletop role-playing games. Whatever, Natalie. But what questions should we chew on or think about asking her next time if we get her to come back?
Think about how, kind of tying into what you were talking about, how ideas get reused and recycled and how our imagination shape the future. Like, I know stuff like, who was it that wrote like 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea? What was that author's name
Jules
again?
Verne.
Thank you.
Is it actually?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Like
I know,
stuff
right?
like the submarine an airplane started out in the imaginations of Jules Verne and H.G. Wells and whatnot, people are like, oh, that's never going to happen. And then boom, now that's like, those things are carrying weapons that can wipe out entire cities and
Yeah.
also just people, just from place to place.
Okay. Other questions we could ask her or other engineering faculty? I know it's we need to get biology in here apparently too. That's something we're discovering. But for engineers, like what would be the next set of questions we could open with next time?
Oh, I'm gonna look through this book. I feel like there's a lot of question material in this.
Oh, absolutely.
So you're going to do some background research
I
on
am gonna
cyberpunk
do
for
some
that.
background research.
Okay.
Oh,
Anything
yeah.
from D&D or other tabletop gaming that we might be able to ask engineering about? Could be for the content of the story or like the way we play it.
We could use D&D. Well, I can't really think of how to phrase this as a question, but we could use D&D to explore these outdated scientific ideas that ancient civilizations came up with, like ether from the Greek, whatnot. Because in D&D, that's real. It's like you actually could have echoes be from a nymph cursed to repeat the last word of and whoever else, if I'm remembering that story correctly.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Of like, oh, and if this is how that worked, what kind of engineering problems would be presented if you had to make a tribute to Neptune?
I like this. Okay, yeah. Because that's like the questions we asked Donna Viola when we said, like, if this is a planet and it were to have life, what would be required for life to be able to survive? And we talked about some of the composition of a moon on Saturn. Is that what it was? I can't remember now. I have to go look at the tape from December. Other final questions?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, well, just what is the, like, I guess, I think it'd be cool to ask engineering students to create an armor that could adapt to different, like, environments and different planets, because that's just a cool thing, going
What
from
would it
somewhere
take?
underwater to somewhere on land. How would that transition happen? What, like, systems would have to change inside your suit to make sure you could survive in it?
Interesting. Other engineering questions, oriented questions?
Any engineering oriented questions that you have? Off camera person? No, we have nothing.
Okay.
I'm excited for the sociology stuff though. I'm gonna write
What?
lists
Do you
of
want to email
stuff.
Do you want to email,
Yeah, I'm gonna
her,
email her.
CC me on it? So just
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know how to do that.
So you know how there's a little box
Yeah.
underneath that
What does
says
that
CC?
mean? Is
It
that
means
like
carbon
carbon copy?
That's what it means.
What
So
does
it
it
says
do?
it basically says it says you should know about this, but I'm not sending it to you. I'm letting you. I'm keeping
Okay.
you in the loop.
I see.
So-
What's the BCC?
Blind carbon copy. It's I'm keeping you in the loop and they don't know.
Oh my gosh, that's
So
like,
yeah,
like
and
a secret.
and so sometimes that one can be a shady form.
It's like
If someone, yeah. So sometimes people use BCC because they don't want you to see the whole mailing list, and sometimes BCC becomes a way to be like, if someone else replies back to you, that person still gets the blind carbon copy, and so that's a whole other thing.
Okay.
What up? All right, we'll stop.